little come more forward. Here. Yeah, put it on a. Here, let me turn it on. Disconnect it for now. Now, disconnect it here, please. Let me turn it on and then. Here, just put that there. Perfect. Yes. We shall start now. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam. Sahaviryam. Karavavahai. Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma vidvishavahai. Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. We are studying the section, the characteristics of a person of knowledge, and what do we mean by a person of knowledge? A person who is no longer ignorant of oneself. A person of knowledge is not what we call, somebody who is very knowledgeable, has several PhDs. That's not a person of knowledge we are talking about. A person who no longer has self-ignorance, Atma Ajnanam. No more ignorant of the nature of oneself as free, whole and limitless. So what does this person look like is Arjuna's question in the Bhagavad Gita towards the end of the second chapter, towards the 50 etc. And so towards that verses 53, starting with 53, he is concerned, what does the person of knowledge look like, act like, how is the person, what is the person like? I want to know. Why do you want to know what a person of knowledge is like? Because I hope to be that person. That's the whole idea. Otherwise it doesn't matter. It's not some kind of a, idle curiosity that makes one wonder what a person of knowledge is like. It's not idle curiosity. It is because I hope to be like that, and I want to see and I want to know if I can also be like that. And so how do I recognize? That's the thing. And then one more caveat here is, before we even begin the discussion of the person of knowledge, is that we can't see this knowledge as something that happens to the self. This quote unquote enlightenment, or whatever it is called in the regular parlance, in common parlance, is not an event that happens to the self. Because if enlightenment is an event, then event comes and event goes. Every event manager knows that. That is what an event is. Before it was not there, correct? That's why it's called event, because it went. That's all it is. It's gone. It's not here anymore. So if it is an event that happens to the self and changes the self irrevocably, so that I look upon myself completely differently, there was point A, which was the self-ignorant I, and then point B, the enlightened I. It is the dream of everyone. This is spiritual romanticism. This is, in fact, it's easy to look at it that way, but logically, And shastrically, according to the Shastra, it makes no sense whatsoever to look at it that way. Because if enlightenment is an event that happens to the self, then you cannot say the self is changeless. You cannot say the self is, Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Atma. It is not that which is Nitya, which is always the same, unchanging. It is not free, already free, and it is not already whole. Then we will be making that mistake that the unwholesome self suddenly became whole, and the changing self suddenly at point B became changeless. So the road to moksha is the road to quote unquote enlightenment is, they will say it's a hard road full of stones and full of pitfalls and potholes and all kinds of things. And because it is a hard road, you have to put an effort, and then this is what you get at the end. What do you get? You get this self-enlightenment. This is not how Bhagavan Krishna talks about it. This is not how the Shastra, the Upanishads describe it. This is not what it is at all. Because you are not trying to reach what you are already not are. You are already free. You are already mukta. You are already, complete. You are already Brahman. It's not that you study about Brahman and become Brahman. You don't. Even though the sentence says Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. Bhavati here doesn't mean becomes. Understands. It's a cognitive shift. It is where I place the I. Do I place the I in everything finite, such as the body, the mind, the senses, or do I, after learning the Shastra, after going to the teacher, after understanding the Bhagavad Gita, do I change where I place the I? I place the I in Brahman, in the cause of the universe, in Bhagavan, and therefore I have a different definition of this I. That is where it is a cognitive shift. It is not something that suddenly happens to the self. It's not like a facelift. Before everything was saggy, and baggy. And then I took a trip to Florida, because that's where facelifts happen. And so I took a trip to Florida, and then everything was just glowing, because I had a face pack and a facelift, and I went to the spa, and then I came back, and then everything was wonderful, because everything that is subject to sagginess and bagginess, what will happen after 4-5 years? Again it will sag, correct? Yeah. We are not talking of that kind of a thing. We are not talking of a physical change. We are talking of a cognitive shift in my own understanding of myself, a self that is already established as the whole. By the Upanishads, I still have to see it. So if enlightenment is not an event, what is it? It is the slow, many times, sometimes, removal of ignorance, and it's the increasing growth of my own clarity. That is what it is. Self-knowledge can be described as a growing clarity where I find myself less reactive, more accommodative, more available, less, anxious, less upset, more there, more present, more free in the sense I understand and experience this freedom without it being inhibited by desires and fears and sorrows. This is what it's a growing clarity. Each time I see a little more, I think this is it. And then, I think this is it. No, that was not it. This is it. That was not it. This is it. So it's like a growing clarity. It's not an instant something that happens, And in this, we have to see this very clearly. And that's why the characteristics of a person of enlightenment become very important, because they, as I said last time, form the sadhanas. And what is the sadhanas? Sadhanas means they form the practice for the rest of the people. The rest of the people who wish to go there, they can take the example of the wise ones and say that, okay, if that is my destination, may as well start behaving like that. It's like the person who is about to move to Hawaii, what do they start doing? They start saying aloha, and even before they have gone there, correct? And they start learning some things about the culture and the language. They start wearing all flowery shirts, This is what, because they have not yet gone to Hawaii, but that is their destination. And so before going, they are already in that space. So similarly, if self-knowledge is what I want, I emulate the behavior of all the people who I respect as that, and that is what Arjuna wants to do, because by this emulation, I can slowly, grow to that. Yeah. Very alarming. Anyway, so that's why it's called voice loft. You hear voices. And so this is the whole thing. So the whole thing is because I want, that is what I want. So I want to know how the people of self-knowledge behave, because I want to be one of them. And so this is the only place where you can fake it and make it, because it happens to be already you. It is siddha vastu, not sadhya vastu. It is already you. So here is where you can actually fake it and make it, because you are not faking it at all. Only you think you are faking it, that's all it is. And so that, the first definition we already saw, because he wanted some very specific things that he could recognize. Like, wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody told me that all enlightened people, if I wanted to be enlightened, and if somebody told me that all the people who have no longer self-ignorance wear blue, then it's very easy, Then you say, oh, that's what I have to do. I have to look for the lakshana of blue. Yatra yatra blue, tatra tatra no more blues. This is what I have to do. Wherever there is blue, then that means that's a place, ironically, because Vedanta is all a paradox, there are no more blues, correct? And so this is all I have to do. But it's not so simple. Bhagavan Krishna points out that this ain't so simple, because you cannot tell an enlightened person from, a wise person from a person who is not wise, just because they are wearing blue or not blue. You cannot tell how they wear. And then what is the other question he asked? How do they talk? Maybe if one is wise, one talks in a soft voice, very, very slowly, for effect. No. And maybe one doesn't talk at all. There are some people who say, if you know, you don't talk. In fact, I heard one such person, and he began his talk by saying, those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. And then he began to give a 2-hour discourse. So what do you conclude, So this way, these are all external characteristics connected to the upadhi, the body, mind, sense complex. So it is nothing to do, it's nothing to do with what one knows. And likewise, you cannot say that the wise person should have only dosas. Yeah, then what will happen to, what will happen to the wise person from Iceland who has never even heard of dosa? Correct? And so you cannot recognize a wise person by what they eat, what they drink, how they talk, how they walk, how they move, how they sit, how they stand, because this is what Arjuna is, a practical man. Arjuna wanted to know practical, pragmatic characteristics, how to recognize in a crowd what stands out, Yeah. If they are talking slowly or if they are eating only idlis, I can go and catch them. Please teach me or please tell me what makes you tick. But this is not so simple, because everybody is, on the face of it, you cannot make out. In fact, unless you are wise, you cannot make out if the other person knows or not. That's what it is. And so if you don't know, then what's the use if you cannot make out, even if you know the, characteristics. So that's why Bhagavan Krishna, in answering this question, is very careful not to talk about the external characteristics. So he goes to the spirit of the question, what makes a person wise? What makes the person no longer, what is the lakshana, the characteristic of the person that no longer has ignorance of the self? And the first characteristics he gives in verse number 55, prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmani eva atmana tushtah sthita prajnah tada uchyate. So the one who gives, we have seen this verse earlier, one who gives up all the desires and fancies before they take even a foothold in the mind. So the fancies come. Suddenly everything starts to look good. On a hot day, you have, what is that? You want daydreams of cool drinks, ice cream, things like that. Cold things. And then what? That's just a fancy. Nothing wrong. What's wrong in thinking of ice cream on a hot day? Nothing wrong. And then what happens? Then I entertain it a little more. And then I start looking at the smartphone for the nearest ice cream place. Correct? And then what happens if I just say, oh, it's only 2 minutes away. Oh, how wonderful. Then the car itself drives there. I don't have to drive. The car drives me there. Then I say, okay, now that I'm here, may as well have ice cream. No problem. There is nothing wrong in that. But if supposing I have mapped out how to go, where I'm going to turn left, where I'm going to turn right, and then suddenly I find somebody tells me, oh, is that where you're going? That shop has closed down. Then what is my reaction? Because now the fancy has become a reality. It's become a desire. The desire requires pursuit, and I'm about to pursue this desire, and then it is a big wall, it is thwarted. Or somebody else comes and says, I don't want ice cream. Somebody you are with, I hate ice cream, and you're trying to impress them. So then you can't go out for ice cream even though the shop is open. In fact, even if you had a cone in the hand, you would throw it. You first hide it and then throw it. Oh, I don't know who threw this stupid ice cream, you would say. Because you want to impress the person. So there are many reasons why there is a big wall between you and the ice cream. And then if at that point I start to scream, then what happens? Then I am not able to let go of this fancy. It has taken a foothold. Correct? But for the wise person, this is a regular person's view to the world. But for the wise person, what happens? As the fancies arise in the mind, they just leave. The mind has a permanent, what should I say? Permanent, it's a well ventilated mind. Like the air, cross ventilation. Air comes through one window and departs through the other. Cross ventilation. So here also, it's a cross ventilated mind. Desire comes, desire goes. And if it's not a cross ventilated mind, what happens? You become cross. Yeah, that's what it is. It leads to becoming really cross with oneself and with everybody else. And so the first characteristics we have seen, as the fancies arise in the mind, the one who is able to give up totally, the one who is able to watch the mind, like one watches the river flow. And then sometimes the tree, in the autumn, the tree near the bank of the river is dropping the leaves and the river is flowing. And you're not concerned where did the destiny of each leaf. You just watch the whole thing and enjoy the colors and enjoy everything without participating in it. So too the wise person is able to watch the desires and not be affected by them. That is what the whole thing we have studied that. And so then, then the next line of the mantra, the verse said that why is this an important characteristic of a wise person? It's an important characteristic primarily because, the reason for overwhelming number of desires that create the pressure to fulfill themselves in the mind is because I am not happy with myself. When I am happy with myself, the desire becomes an embellishment, like the peacock feather on Lord Krishna's hair. That's an embellishment. It's a vibhuti, it's a glory. Like the flute, yellow clothes, pitambara, yellow clothes, dancing, standing in this position, flute, and the peacock feather all become glories. They are also desires, but the desire is elevated to the level of glory when it is not having that pressure behind it. If you snatched Krishna's peacock feather, he's not going to start having a bad day, a bad hair day, or a bad day, because peacock feather is no longer with me. Oh, he took away my flute. I am despondent. So there's the second, an aligned characteristic of giving up the desires as they arise in the mind. Who can do that? The one who understands that he or she is totally happy with oneself. When you are happy with oneself, you can let go. You're a satisfied person. So Vairagya comes when there is satisfaction. Think of the marbles you played with as a child. Marbles, dolls, trucks, whatever you played with. Now if you play with your children, or if you're playing with a small child, and and you don't want to take all the marbles. No, it's mine. You can't have it. And go home. You're making all the sounds of the car, vroom, vroom, vroom. You're doing along with the child. You're enjoying yourself because in relation to the marbles, in relation to the little toy truck, you haven't lost your marbles. They are intact. Because you have vairagya, you have dispassion with regard to those desires. Because you've been there and done that, you're a satisfied person. You're a sannyasi, you're a truck sannyasi, you're a doll sannyasi, you're a marble sannyasi. So these things don't move you. It's other kinds of things now that catch you. So this way, atmani eva atmana tushtah. So atma tushtatvam, the status of being happy with oneself is dependent upon giving up the desires. And also giving up the desires is dependent upon the fact that I am happy with myself. This is what it is. It's, in other words, a catch of the number 22 catch. Correct? Yeah, it's a catch 22 situation. That's why the Vidya, the knowledge helps, because the more I study the Gita, the more all these desires, these unmanageable desires become manageable. We don't talk of control. There's no control. It's about whether the desires manage me or am I on top of them and I can manage them. That's what it is. So now we are getting ready to look at verse 56, which is the second lakshana of the jnani, the second characteristics or the desire of the jnani. So let us read that. Dukkheshvanudvigna manaha, Dukkheshvanudvigna manaha, Sukheshu vigatasprihah, Vitaraga bhaya krodhah, Sthitadhir muniruchyate. I hope you all had lunch, right? Yeah, let me hear it. Okay, we're going to chant it one more time. Everybody is being very scared and diffident. Yeah, let me hear it. Dukkheshvanudvigna manaha, Sukheshu vigatasprihah, Vitaraga bhaya krodhah, Sthitadhir muniruchyate. Yeah. So this is also a condition of the mind. That is why it's not an external characteristics, because you can't go inside the head of somebody and see how they are reacting to situations or not. So this is again a condition of the mind, in the sense that this is a measure of a person's reactivity. The second characteristic. Dukkheshu means surrounded by sorrows, plural. Anudvigna manaha, the one whose mind is not stirred up, is not all riled up, is not all, like low threshold. Many people have a low threshold for fear, pain, sorrow, anything. They can't, very little threshold. Anything slight happens, they get very agitated and afflicted. So this person may be surrounded by sorrows and is what? There is no udvega. Udvega means agitation. Like what the washing machine does, agitation, goes like this, up and down, What are you doing to me? Why do I have to wash your clothes every day? Very agitated, and so the agitation is there. So, like that, imagine the spin cycle happening in the mind. One feels wrung out, one feels dried out, one is in pain. All that is not there. So, surrounded by sorrows, anudvigna manaha. So, anudvigna manaha is not the condition of the mind. Anudvigna manaha is the person who has blessed with a mind that is unafflicted. So, it's the condition of the person who is blessed with a mind, who is endowed with a non-reactive mind, a non-agitated, a non-afflicted mind. Think about this, that's a lot. Even those sorrows, plural. We'll see what those sorrows are. We're just looking at the verse first. Sukheshu. Okay, when surrounded by sorrows, unafflicted. Sukheshu, when surrounded by sources of happiness, vigata sprihaha, beyond the desire to try to control that happiness. This is what happens to us. When we don't have Vedanta knowledge, one sad thing, of course, one is a puddle on the floor, one has to be carried out in a bucket, okay, but when happy things happen, one is what? One hits the ceiling. There is no management. One hits the ceiling and then has to be peeled from the ceiling, get stuck over there. There is no median road. There is no middle road, because it's either or mentality. This is what is the a mind that is not instructed in the Gita, a mind that is not in Vedanta. What is the person who is in Vedanta called? Vedantin. That's why it's called in. Yeah. So that is all it is. So if you don't have this knowledge, then you are going to be taken for a big ride by all the sorrows, and then you're going to be spit out of the ride of sorrows, and then you're going to be taken by a ride by all the happy go round and the merry go round and the sorrow go round, and then you're going to be spit out of one ride to the next, and no wonder you feel dizzy and you don't feel that you are in command. So Sukheshu, when surrounded by happiness, Vigata Sprihaha means the one who is able to manage that without losing the head. You don't lose the head whether you have challenges or whether you have happiness. And then what? Vita. Vita means beyond. Here we can translate it literally as beyond. Untouched by. What? Raga. What is raga here? All kinds of I want desires. Includes Dvesha also. Dvesha means I don't want. Vita raga bhaya. Bhaya means what? Fear. Krodha. Krodha means anger. So untouched by, because this is it's not just a measure of non-reactivity. Somebody could have trained themselves not to react. I'm very sad, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm very angry, but I'm not going to say anything. And then you come home and blow the lid, correct? That's not what we are talking about. The one who has processed their emotions and their desires together, so that what they have at the end is a non-reactive mind. So that is Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. A mind that does not pick up, itself, and react to sources that can make it angry, sources that can make it sad, sources that can make it agitated, sources that can make it afraid. A mind that is beyond all that, Sthita Dhihi. The one whose dhi means buddhi, whose intellect stays. Where does it stay? In the same place where you left it. That's where it is. Stays where? Stays with you. That is what is self-knowledge. It doesn't go away from the I that is defined and given to you by the Guru. In the study of the Upanishad, that I that was talked about, it stays right there. Sthita Dhihi. Sthiradhihi. Sthiradhi, Sthitadhi, same thing. Sthiradhihi, yasya. So here, Sthitadhihi is not describing the intellect, it's describing the person endowed with such an intellect. What kind of an intellect? An intellect that is, a mind that has the ability to stay with itself and not run after, any any stimulants that are thrown its way, you know. So a mind which is not on caffeine, you know, in other words, a mind for which the desire is not the fuel. The desire becomes the caffeine for the mind. Even if somebody says, I don't drink tea, I don't drink coffee, chocolate, how is that spelt? I don't have all that. Even if you say that, here is what we are talking about, is a mind that is with oneself. Otherwise the mind is all over the place. You know, my heart is given somewhere, the mind is not available for thinking. Mind gets distracted, mind wanders, body wanders, mind wanders along with the body, all these things happen. But here is a mind that is available to me. And in fact, that's the same mind one should have for the study. It should be available to me. That's why these characteristics are not just for the jnani. It's for the jnani wannabe, right? Because for the study I need these, you know, I need the same things. Jnani wannabe, correct. So because I want to be the jnani, so there I cultivate these so that my mind is with me, and it's important for a student of Vedanta to have the mind with oneself. Otherwise what happens? You can just say never mind to the study. That's what you can say. So Adi Shankara has some interesting things to say. I will read and explain. Very beautiful commentary, a small one but very powerful ones. He says dukkheshu. He picks up on the fact that it is a plural word. It is not one dukkha, dukkham, or dukkhe, in sorrow. In sorrows, dukkheshu, locative case, he immediately goes to the Shastra and he says, adhyatmikadishu prapteshu na udvignaha na prakshubhita dukkha praptau mano yasya saha ayam anudvigna manaha. You know? So, dukkheshu, why are there multiple sorrows? Well, you don't know my life. My life is full of multiple sorrows. Who said I have only one sorrow? Let me list the number of things. How much time you have? First of all, let me tell you all the things that are going on, going with me, going on in my life, and by the time I'm done, you will also be sad. You know, that is what my life is. My life is so sad that by the end, that's why we have sorrows, because my sorrow is now transferred onto you also. It is such a miserable life. That's not the idea. The sorrows actually are, or any kind of difficulties are talked about from the standpoint of the Veda in three different ways. You know, they are called tapatraya. Traya means three. Yeah, the Vedas, there is an abiding presence of 3 and 7, in the Vedas. So this is one of the triads. So there are the same sorrow can be looked at from 3 standpoints. So the three, or they could be different manifestations of sorrow from 3 standpoints. What are the 3 standpoints? First is centered on forces out of my control. What is that called? Adi Daivikam or Adi Deva. Adi Daivikam, earthquake. This is famous. California is famous for earthquakes, correct? And how can you predict? You can't predict. You just have to run and crawl under something. That's all you have time for, So when the earthquake will come, you don't know, and when the earthquake comes, what it will do to your house, and why your house is all in shambles, and the neighbor's house is going like this to your house, because not even a scratch, nothing has happened to it. Why? This is all what is called Adi Daivikam. It's not under my control, like the wildfire. Adi Daivikam to a certain extent. Because you don't know which house it's going to consume next. So many thousands of people have evacuated, but you don't know which house it's going to touch and which house it is going to leave untouched. Adi Daivikam. So this is the source of sorrow, and even though it's not going to touch my house, I have still had to go through the pain and the sorrow of evacuation, correct? That is all kinds of discomfort. So Adi Daivikam, and then that is one source of sorrow. And then what? Centered on forces beyond my control. Devanam adhikritya tishtati. That which is centered on forces I cannot control. Then we have the second kind of sorrow, adhibhautikam. What is adhibhautikam? centered on my surroundings. So no earthquake, no forest fire, everything is okay. But what? I don't like where I'm sitting, in the class. Or I don't like, my neighbors if I'm in the house. I don't like the neighbors on this side, I don't like the neighbors on that side. But everybody else has such wonderful neighbors. Why only I have these bad neighbors? Adi bhautikam. Because they're always making noise. This one is always remodeling, so always, bashing up something, and and the other one is always partying. And I am a sandwich, inside, I am sandwiched between these two noisy neighbors. Adi bhautikam. Then if we escape that also, what is it that can never be escaped without Vedanta? Adhyatmikam, centered on I, aham. Everything is okay. I am not, no earthquake. Neighbors also for a change being quiet. But then what happened? I want them to make noise. Why? Because I can't stand the internal noise. What is the internal noise? Regrets, fears, doubts, pains, sorrows arising from within me, centered on I. And so, what are those regrets? Why did I do this? How many times I knew better, I shouldn't have done that. Why did I take up that dead end job? Why did I get married to this person? Really. All the warning signs were there. I shouldn't have got married. But I got married to this person. Now I'm stuck. Why did I do this? Why didn't I do this? And then if I'm spared of those thoughts, for a while they become quiet. And the second set of thought is, why did somebody else not do this to me? Why didn't they say thank you? Why didn't they say sorry? Why didn't they do this for me? They know I want this. Why didn't they do this for me? So regret, guilt, and what? Hurt. These are all adhyatmika dukkhas. So even though technically when you list, you go from Adi Daivika because you give God the place that Bhagavan deserves, and then you go back to you, centered on acts of God, centered on the five elements and the elementals, my surroundings, and then centered on me. But Adi Shankara does a flip in his commentary, and what does he say? Adhyatmika Adishu, he says. He goes with centered on I, because really speaking, what control you have over acts of God? No. You cannot say, unless there are no more earthquakes, no more fires, I will not be happy. You cannot say that. And it's not true also. You cannot say that. You can, but you have no control over it. And you cannot say, until these two neighbors behave, I am going to be sad. Only when they behave, I am going to be happy. That also you cannot say, because you don't have control over the neighbors. So you have only control over the one source of sorrow, which is what? Arising, where the I has been dislocated, mislocated. That's the only place you have control. You are not in charge of the other two sources of sorrow. You are only in charge of this source of sorrow. And what is this source of sorrow? Centered on I. Then because if you don't have sorrow centered on I, where the I notion is, then the other two things don't matter. Even in an earthquake, the person can be happy. The house went away, good. Less thing to worry about. One less thing to worry about. That will be the jnani's reaction. House went away in the fire. Okay. That was a modern fire ritual, yajna. This for the house was an offering. That's all right. If I am meant to live in a house, another one will come, or somebody will give me shelter. I have that. That jnani has that, inner security, so that they don't get immediately discombobulated when a possession goes, even by the acts of Bhagavan. And then what? Adhyatmika. So the neighbors are noisy. So what? You either move if you can, and if you can't move, you refuse to be moved by the noise. You are unmoved by the noise because you are not going to give it the time of day. You are going to look and find your peace elsewhere. Your peace is not dependent upon other people's behaviors. Then finally what? Adhyatmika, centered on I, all these sorrows, that is relieved through study, through the exposure to the teachings, and through what else? Through through other sadhanas like meditation, karma yoga, antaranga, bahiranga sadhanas, inner sadhanas, outer sadhanas, etc. Those kinds of, that relatively speaking the sorrow is relieved, the edge is taken off enough to come and sit in class and to be able to, be there and listen. And then once you gain the knowledge, absolutely there is no more sorrow centered on the I, because the I itself undergoes a radical redefinition. The I is no longer equated to the body, mind, sense complex. The I is equated to what? Bhagavan. And is Bhagavan sad? The answer always should be no. Bhagavan is not sad. If Bhagavan is sad, then what's the point of understanding I am Bhagavan? Then that's not the point. So therefore, Adi Shankara says, Adhyatmika Adishu Prapteshu. Prapteshu means when confronted by na udvignam, na prakshubhitam, the one who is not disturbed, perturbed. Yeah. One who is not perturbed. One who does not allow himself to feel victimized by people, situations and things. That is what the whole thing is. The one who will not let themselves feel victimized. And I spoke about this last time also. Cultivating a threshold of pain and sorrow is important. This is what is called titiksha. Titiksha means forbearance, the ability to live with extremes, whether the extremes are in terms of weather or people's behavior, and without reacting, without complaining, and without stuffing it in either. Yeah. Without stuffing it in and worrying about it endlessly. This is what is called forbearance, titiksha. So titiksha is what? Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. Vivek Chudamani defines titiksha as like this. What is that? All the dukkhas. Sahanam means the sarva dukkhanam, all the difficulties, all the dukkhas. What do I do? Sahanam, the ability to bear them. Am I a martyr or what? No, only those sorrows that cannot be changed. Yeah. I'm not trying, one is not a martyr or one is passive. Oh, this is my karma, so I have to just sit here. I'm hot, but I have to sit here. Why? There is fan, sit under the fan. No, because it's my karma to sit here away from the fan. Somebody this is not the theory of karma. Somebody who says that is foolish. Here we are talking of when there is no fan. Yeah. When there is no fan, what kind of a person are you? That's what the whole thing is. So this is what the whole situation is that the ability to be able to withstand difficulties without reacting and without internalizing it and without going completely bonkers, that threshold, I increase the threshold of discomfort. And this is what one can do as a practicing jnani wannabe, because you can start every day increasing the threshold of discomfort. And in the West, we better do that, because in India, nature takes care of this. We don't have to do anything. Because 6 hours a day, there is no electricity. What are you going to do? Yeah, you can't do anything. So you have to just, be with it. And then, on the day there is electricity, there is no water. And on the day there is water and electricity, there is no phone. This is, India takes care of preparation for Vedanta. If you want to prepare for Vedanta, move to India, stay there for 6 months in a not in one of these, what is that? NRI. What does NRI mean? Non-returning Indian. So not in one of these NRI colonies where everything is cushy, but in a regular place, you go stay, and then you will be ready for Vedanta, no problem. After 6 months you come and you study. This verse will unfold itself. You don't even have to you just have to read it. It will unfold itself. Why? Because the preparation has happened. And here we are used to the thermostat all the time, 71.2, 71.3, 71.5. I want this is exactly how it should be, and this is my life. And and then when the doorbell rings, people get angry. Who is it? This is something very interesting. In America, I have seen when the doorbell you're not, in India, the children are thrilled. Everybody is thrilled. Somebody is coming. You fall over each other to open the door. And here we have come so far. We get annoyed, if not outright angry. Who is it at this time? Anytime they'll say, this time, who is it? I'm not expecting anybody. Who is it? And then you're already chidchida. Chidchida means you're on the edge. You go open the door and and the person is there. What are you selling? No, I'm not selling anything. I don't want to buy anything. I'm not selling anything. I just I've lost my way. I go ask in the gas station. It's around the corner. What do you think I am? You think I'm GPS? You don't have a smartphone? No, I don't have a smartphone. Why you don't have a smartphone? This is our attitude to something that comes. And the doorbell ringing is a metaphor, is a symbol of what? Of expecting the unexpected. This is what the jnani does, expects the unexpected. And we can practice this by pasting on a cheerful smile each time the door rings. Yeah. Door doesn't ring, the bell rings. Each time the bell rings, in the beginning it's hard, but I smile, I have to fake it, and then what? I make it. This is what it is. This is how to practice. Everybody says, I want a day-to-day Vedanta. This is day-to-day Vedanta. This is what it is. We have become so, so away from the tradition that teaches this preparation naturally. We have become so far away from that we have our own threshold and we delight in the fact that this is me. Who is this you? I am a bundle of ragadveshas. That is inflexible. An inflexible bundle of ragadveshas. What do? Make the ragadveshas do yoga. You also go to yoga, and ragadveshas also go to yoga class. They go to karma yoga class, they learn how to bend so that they don't break you, and you also learn flexibility. This is what it is. The ragadveshas are put on a diet. They are put on a discipline. You have to starve them at certain times because that's not the correct time to feed them. They don't eat in between meals. They eat when you tell them to eat. This is what it is. And this is how we learn. This is how we practice. And that practice here is to achieve the mindset of the jnani who is unperturbed by the unexpected. Because the unexpected is often coded as sorrowful, because I'm not ready for it. If I'm not ready for it, then it is something to be afraid of. Pujya Swamiji always talks about the ninja stance. This is the ninja stance. Oh no! Always oh no! This is how it is. And sometimes people's language betrays that. I was sitting next to my seatmate. Is that what is called? The person sitting next to you on the plane? My seatmate was one such person one time. It was a long flight too. And then, the flight, it was going slowly and then it stopped. We don't know why it stopped. It was going on the runway. It hadn't picked up speed. It stopped. And immediately he said, oh no. Oh no, it stopped. I think there's a mechanical failure. What do you think? I said, well, I don't know that. Let's wait and see. But there was no mechanical failure. Again it picked up and then again it stopped. Oh, see, I told you, something is wrong. They're going to make us evacuate the plane. And oh no, this is not what I paid for. They just take so much money. How much did your ticket cost? I said, I don't remember. My ticket cost $555. And this is somebody is getting rich. They're robbing us blind. And how can we just sit there? And what is going on? This is, he just went on he was very agitated. So then I said, let's see. And then again it picked up. Oh, nothing happened. Oh, it's going. Oh, it's picking up speed. Oh, it even managed to take off. Oh, So then, then they said something was, what is that? That it's a screen for showing movies that is in front of you. They said, having some difficulty, we'll reboot it. And he turned towards me and said, I told you. Oh no, I told you. This is awful. I said, is there something you want to see? Well, I don't know that. And then he flipped through because he was still, had not yet rebooted. He says, oh, these movies are rubbish. I've seen them all. And what is this? This airline is showing these horrible movies. Because you know how old they are? I said, I don't know because I have not seen any of them. So I don't know how old they are. No, they are very old. And this airline is useless. Because they are showing old movies. In that other airline, they are showing new movies. Then why didn't you fly that one? Because I couldn't get the ticket. Okay, then be okay with what you have. And then then of course when the cart came and what will you have to drink? Oh, why do you ask? He said to the flight attendant. You have only apple juice, orange juice, and cranberry juice. So why are you asking? Give me anything. Give me something. So then she got very perplexed. She said, I don't know what you really want. So do you want beer? Do you want wine? Yeah, but that costs $5. This was, it was unending. It was really unending, because the person was so agitated, no threshold for anything. And there was a child sitting in the back. Of course, that was again. Why are there children in this world? Why do they bring children on the plane? There should be seats only for adults. The children should be somewhere in the back. And then the child dropped something and then went under the seat and I think touched his foot, from the back. Oh, what's that? Oh! This is all called udvega. This is agitation. You expect the worst all the time and your mind is in such a state of turmoil, And then he was very upset with me. How can you just sit there quietly? Don't you see, aren't you disturbed? I said, not by this child, no. So this is what the whole thing is, You learn a lot when you travel. And so therefore, this udvega, he has to be calmed down. And you cannot say that I'm going to wait until I learn Vedanta. And after I learn Vedanta, it will calm down naturally. Because, I told you there is that catch-22. Until you are relatively available, otherwise in class also you are saying, oh no, why did you come? You don't look like a Vedantin, only I should be in the class, why are you there? Then all that the teacher is saying is lost, correct? So this oh no attitude, it should be, lessened in order to prepare for this teaching. I am able to welcome. I have to learn to say yes to life. And for homework, you can try doing that, Just for this whole weekend, forget next week. This whole weekend, left over Saturday, and then the whole of Sunday, try not to use the word no. Starting now, Yes. See how your life changes. See what happens. See the areas of discomfort. See where it pricks is where you have to grow. See where it hurts. See where there is discomfort. Observe that. Love that discomfort up. And then you will see that there is this weekend has become a weekend of growth. So we are not going to say no. We are going to say yes. Yes. We're going to say yes. And the jnani is distinguished by the one who says yes to life. Saying yes to life is saying yes to the unknown, is saying yes to the unexpected, is saying yes to Bhagavan, is saying yes to one's own karma, is the one who is in a state of acceptance. One who is in acceptance because there is nothing to fight against. All there is one. And that one happens to be me. Bhagavan is me. Other people are extension of just me. Everything is me. So where is the fight? Where is the oh no? What am I saying no to? It's like I don't say no to the right hand. Why do you exist? Or better still, I am right-handed. So I don't say no to the left hand. Look at this one, so useful. Why are you existing? What do? You can't do anything. Can you write? No, this is the hand talking. No, I can't write. The hand is becoming smaller because it's very sad now. Can you write? No. Can you pick up things? No. Can you do embroidery? No. Can you cook? No. Can you stir the pot? Barely. Then what is the use? Why are you even here? Off with the hand. Why? Because there is a purpose. And even though this hand is totally useless, it has, it is what it is. It is me. Just like, I don't disown parts of the body that stop working. I don't disown them because it's still not other than me. Similarly, the jnani doesn't disown anything, anyone, anywhere. May not engage with them, that's a different thing. That's a different conversation. But there is no disowning happening. So, this weekend's homework is what? Saying yes to anything, anyone. And see where the discomfort is, see where the fear is, see where the agitation is. And then that gives you already the clue of how to take care of it. So, dukkha praptau mano yasya anudvignam ayam anudvigna manaha. Tatha, in the same manner, sukheshu prapteshu vigata spriha trishna yasya saha agnihi iva indhanadi adhane sukhani anuvivardhate saha vigata spriha. So, this is the other side. So, in sorrow, one is non-agitated. What happens in happiness? Also, happiness produces agitation. Yes. A revelry and a kind of a high, an escalation of something, but still it's an agitation to that calm mind. So, do I have to be always stoic? You won the California lottery. Yeah, good. That's great. I don't have to be like that. I can show my emotions, but I don't let the emotions carry me away. I don't let them carry me away. That is the beauty of it. Because this is what happens to the ones who are not exposed to this knowledge. The ones who are not jnanis, what happens? We are not able to handle. One is not able to handle the happiness. One is not able to handle power. To someone who is always the underdog, you give the underdog and you put the underdog on a big pedestal, correct? And the dog feels tall and starts to bark at everybody and everything immediately. Same thing with a human being. You give the one who was, didn't have power, you give them the reins of power, and first thing they start strutting around. Who is like me? Nobody is like me. I am everything. Shut up, sit down. I enjoy ordering everybody. And then what? The power goes, I also go. I get deflated, correct? So there is no sense of inflation when the happiness comes. I enjoy it without getting inflated. Because the inflation happens to the fire. Because when the fire gets more indhanam. Indhanam means fuel. When you're doing yajna, you put, what is that? Ghee. And then what happens? It becomes more. Give me more, more, more. You give the forest fire one forest, it's not happy, it migrates to the next forest. The jnani is not like that. Sukheshu, in times of happiness, the person does not want to continue that happiness and is not completely turned around by that happiness, is not dependent upon that happiness. Vigata sprihaha, the desire to be in that happy state doesn't matter. Is not even in the picture because the person is already happy, doesn't need a state to make them happy. They are already happy in their own, in their own self. So they are not looking for something to make them happy. And so when that happy thing happens to come along, one doesn't try to elongate it and try to keep it to themselves. They just enjoy it as it comes, as it goes. It is there, wonderful. It is not there, even better. This is what the whole thing is, very beautiful. And so Adi Shankara talks about this very nicely, and he says that unlike a fire, the person is not inflated with a sense of happiness. So Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, and there is a kind of a logic here. The one who is beyond raga. Raga means all kinds of desires, raga and dvesha. The one who has overcome that or learned to manage that. It's not about controlling or stopping desire. It's outgrowing the desires, because that which is the most desirable is myself. I study about that myself, and I am fixed in that knowledge, and I have assimilated that teaching. So therefore I am not desiring for something to make me complete. So that raga is not there. And then what? Vita raga bhaya. Bhaya also, fear, comes because of desire. Wherever there is desire, there is the fear of that desire not being fulfilled, and if that desire is fulfilled, there is the fear of that desire being taken away. Yeah, that fulfillment can go away. So, desire and fear are together. So, the one who is free of being a wanting person does not identify as the desirer. Desires come and go, such a person, and then what? Bhaya and krodha. Krodha is also connected to desire. Krodha means what? Anger. Anger is connected to desire because if you look closely at the cause of anger, it is always a thwarted desire. I did not get my way, that's why I'm angry, I'm fuming. Yeah, that is what it is. So, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, the one who is beyond these negative emotions, because the source of the negative emotion is my desire. And so the desire is not removed, it is made peace with. Yeah. I see that what I desire is not the object of desire. What the only thing I want is to stop wanting. That's really what I want. That's the ultimate desire, is to stop being a wanting person, to stop wanting. And so that desire, when I address, all the other desires drop. He's going to say that later. All the other desires slowly drop, and then what you have is what? What you have is the person of knowledge. Sthitadhihi munihi uchyate mananashilatvat, the one who is a contemplative being. That is the person we are talking about. We are talking of a being who is contemplative. One child asked me, everybody meditates on Shiva. Who does Shiva meditate on? Because Shiva is always in meditation if you see the photos. I said Shiva meditates on himself. This is what it is. Atma Ratihi, Atma Ramaha, Atma Kridaha. The one who is revels in the truth of oneself, the one who is cheerful without needing for the desire to be fulfilled, one whose disposition is cheerful, because one is not dependent on desires anymore. I'm not, no longer saying until I have this I'm happy, or until I don't have this I'm happy. No more that. I have discovered myself to be the source of all that is complete, all that is free, all that is whole. So therefore there is no more desire for anything. This also one can practice. To, as the desires come in the mind, you just say, do I really want this? Do I really need this? And what are the consequences of having this down the road? Think. Then you will run away from it. Yeah. Like a big house. What are the consequences? Oh, inflation, having to keep it up, mortgage. Yeah. The operative word is mort. Mort in Latin means death. That's what it is. Yeah. And all these things, house I need, but do I need this sprawling big mansion? Then when you have the desire, entertain it in this way. Have a cup of tea with it and think of what will happen down the road. And then you will yourself say, don't want, I'm happy where I am. You logically follow the course of it. This is how to, emulate the jnani. Slowly, one does that as one studies, as one prepares for this knowledge. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Tomorrow also we have from 9:30 to 10:30. We take a short break and then come back and have one more class. It's another text called Bodhasara. You will enjoy that also. What is your name? Srijit, yes, I have heard a lot about you. I'm glad that you are able to make it today. Yeah. Rita told me.
Oh.
Yes, Rita and Kalyan both told me about you. Wonderful. Good that you are here. I also thought maybe you are not in town, but I'm glad you came. Wonderful. Good. Yeah, we don't have time for questions, and I don't know what all